I still remember that day like it was yesterday. The way the gym smelled after our intense basketball practice. That familiar mix of sweat, rubber, and the lingering scent of whatever cleaning product the janitors used on the floors. It was my third year on the university team, and I had settled into a comfortable routine with my teammates. We were a tight-knit group, spending countless hours together between practices, games, and road trips. But there was always something a little different about my relationship with Jake. Jake played power forward, tall, naturally athletic, with the kind of easy confidence that seemed to draw everyone to him. He was undeniably straight, had a girlfriend named Megan who regularly attended our games, and I was the only openly gay guy on the team. While there was never any explicit tension between us, there was always this unspoken carefulness in how we interacted, like invisible boundaries that neither of us acknowledged but both respected. That particular Wednesday practice had been brutal. Coach Williams was in one of his moods after our disappointing loss to our crosstown rivals, and he had run us through drill after punishing drill until even the most conditioned guys were doubled over, gasping for breath. By the time he finally blew the whistle signaling the end of practice, we all practically collapsed onto the nearest bench, reaching for water bottles and towels. "Hit the showers and get some rest," Coach barked. "And think about what went wrong last game. We're fixing those mistakes tomorrow." One by one, my teammates dragged themselves toward the locker room, their usual post-practice banter subdued by exhaustion. I stayed behind a few extra minutes, as I often did, to work on my free throws. It was a personal ritual. I wouldn't leave until I made 10 in a row. I was so focused on my shooting that I didn't immediately notice Jake had stayed behind too. "Your release is a little off." His voice startled me as my 8th consecutive shot bounced off the rim. I turned to find him leaning against the wall, gym bag slung over his shoulder, watching me with an amused expression. "Thanks for the analysis," I replied with a slight eye roll, retrieving the ball and stepping back to the line. "Shouldn't you be heading out? Doesn't Megan have that study group thing tonight?" Jake shrugged. "Canceled. Besides, I wanted to work on something too." He dropped his bag and walked over, picking up another ball from the rack. "Mind if I join?" That's how it started, just two teammates staying after practice to work on their shots. Nothing unusual about that. We fell into a rhythm, taking turns at the free throw line, occasionally offering each other tips or gentle ribbing when a shot went wide. The gym had emptied completely by then, leaving just the echo of bouncing balls and our voices in the cavernous space. After about 20 minutes, Jake stopped shooting and sat down on the bleachers, wiping sweat from his forehead with the bottom of his shirt. "Can I ask you something?" he said, his tone suddenly serious in a way that made me tense up slightly. I nodded, sitting down a respectful distance away from him. "It's about Michael." Michael was our point guard, brilliant on the court, but notoriously private off it. He'd been acting strange lately, missing optional practices and seeming distracted during games. "What about him?" I asked cautiously. Jake hesitated, spinning the basketball between his palms. "I think he might be, questioning things. And I don't know how to let him know it's okay." Let me explain why this moment mattered so much. In that instant, everything shifted. Jake wasn't staying after practice to work on his jump shot. He was seeking me out specifically, not as a teammate, but as someone with a perspective he valued. Someone who might understand something he couldn't. "Why do you think that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral despite my surprise. Jake sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Some comments he's made. The way he clams up whenever guys talk about dating. And last weekend at that party, I saw him talking to this guy for like an hour, and there was definitely something there. I'm not trying to out him or anything," he added quickly. "I just want him to know he's got support, But I don't know how to have that conversation without making things weird." I couldn't help but smile a little. "So you thought you'd ask the resident gay guy for advice?" "When you put it that way, it sounds kind of stupid," Jake laughed, looking slightly embarrassed. "No, it's not stupid," I assured him. "It's actually really cool of you to care that much." What happened next was something I never expected. Jake and I sat in those bleachers for almost 2 hours, having the most honest conversation we'd ever shared. He asked me about my coming out experience, not in that awkward, overly cautious way some straight people do, but with genuine interest and empathy. He told me about his cousin who had come out as transgender the previous year and how his family had struggled to adapt. We talked about Michael and the unique pressures of being an athlete questioning your sexuality. "I just don't want him to feel alone," Jake said at one point. Like, I can't imagine how hard it must have been for you, joining the team and not knowing how guys would react. It wasn't always easy, I admitted. There were definitely moments I felt like I had to prove myself twice as much. Once as a player, and once as a gay player who wouldn't make anyone uncomfortable. Jake was quiet for a moment. Did I ever make you feel that way? Uncomfortable, I mean. The question caught me off guard. Had he? There had been times early on when I'd noticed him keeping a certain physical distance. No casual arm throws over the shoulder, fewer high fives than he gave other teammates. I'd always assumed it was unconscious on his part. Sometimes, I said honestly. Not in any major way. Just little things. He nodded slowly, absorbing this. I'm sorry about that. I think I was worried about giving the wrong impression or something. Which is really messed up when I think about it now. The wrong impression to who? I asked. To me or to everyone else? Both, maybe. I don't know. He shook his head. It's stupid. Like somehow if I treated you exactly like every other teammate, people would think. Or you would think. He trailed off, looking frustrated with his inability to articulate it. That's the thing about homophobia, I said gently. Even when we think we're completely accepting, sometimes these little unconscious biases sneak in. The idea that normal friendly behavior between guys might be interpreted differently if one of them is gay. Jake looked at me then with such genuine remorse that I felt a surge of affection for him. I want to do better, he said simply. And that's when he did the thing that completely caught me off guard. He reached into his gym bag and pulled out a small rainbow pin. I got this last week. I was thinking of putting it on my backpack. It's not much, but I thought maybe it would be a signal. To Michael. To you. To anyone on the team who might need to see it. I stared at the pin, this tiny object that represented so much. That would be really cool, Jake. Would it be weird? Or like, performative, or something? He asked, suddenly uncertain. It might be if you were doing it for attention, I said. But you're not. You're doing it because you care. He nodded, seeming relieved. Cool. Cool. As we finally packed up to leave the gym, the conversation shifted to lighter topics. Upcoming games, a difficult professor we both had for an elective course, plans for the weekend. But something fundamental had changed between us. The invisible boundary had dissolved. In the parking lot, as we were about to head to our respective cars, Jake did something else unexpected. He gave me a hug, not the brief, backslapping, no homo type of hug that was common among teammates, but a real embrace. Thanks for talking with me, he said. I learned a lot. On the drive home, I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. How often do we make assumptions about the people around us? How many potential connections do we miss because we're afraid to cross perceived boundaries or ask genuine questions? Jake had surprised me in the best possible way, reminding me that people are always more complex than the labels we assign them. The next day at practice, I watched as Jake interacted with Michael. Nothing obvious or calling attention, just a slightly more intentional inclusion, making sure Michael was part of conversations, partnering with him for drills. And yes, there was a small rainbow pin attached to the strap of his gym bag. I noticed Michael looking at it, a flicker of something crossing his face, surprise, maybe, or recognition. 2 weeks later, Michael stayed after practice too. He waited until everyone else had left, then approached me as I was gathering my things. Can I talk to you about something? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. And I knew, in that moment, that Jake's intuition had been right. Of course, I said, sitting back down on the bench. Whatever you need. Michael didn't come out to me that day. That would happen gradually, over several conversations in the following weeks. But he did talk about feeling confused, about the pressure to maintain a certain image as an athlete, about his fear of disappointing his deeply religious parents. And I listened, offering what advice I could, sharing my own experiences when relevant. When I told Jake about it later, with Michael's permission, his face lit up with a mixture of pride and relief. So the pin worked? He asked. The pin helped. I corrected him. But it was everything else too. The way you've been with him, creating that safe space. It made a difference. What started as an unexpected conversation after practice evolved into something much more significant. Jake became an active ally, not just for me or Michael, but for LGBTQ+ issues broadly. He attended campus pride events, engaged thoughtfully in discussions about inclusivity in sports, and challenged homophobic comments when he heard them from other players or friends. Our friendship deepened too. The carefulness that had once characterized our interactions was replaced by genuine comfort and trust. We discovered shared interests beyond basketball, a love for the same obscure indie band, a mutual obsession with crime documentaries, a shared hatred for our university's dining hall lasagna. We started hanging out regularly outside of team activities, sometimes with other teammates, sometimes just the two of us. Looking back now, that afternoon in the gym was a turning point, not just for Jake and me, or even for Michael, but for our entire team culture. It started a ripple effect of greater openness and authenticity. Other players began asking questions they might have previously been afraid to ask, sharing aspects of themselves they might have previously kept hidden. Our team became closer, more cohesive, both on and off the court. I've thought a lot about why Jake chose to stay after practice that day, why he decided to have that conversation with me specifically. When I finally asked him about it months later, his answer was simple. I was tired of pretending to be someone I'm not. What do you mean? I asked, confused. You weren't pretending about anything. He smiled. I was pretending to be the kind of guy who keeps his distance from his gay teammate because he's worried what people might think. That's not who I am. Or at least, it's not who I want to be. That's the thing about authentic connections. They require courage from all sides. The courage to be vulnerable, to ask difficult questions, to challenge our own assumptions and biases. Jake showed that courage when he stayed after practice that day. And in doing so, he taught me something important about not making assumptions about straight teammates, or anyone, really. We all contain multitudes. We all have the capacity to surprise each other in wonderful ways. Sometimes, it just takes one person willing to stay after practice when everyone else has gone home. One person brave enough to say, "Can I ask you something?" And in that simple question, worlds of understanding can open up. Now, 3 years later, Jake is still one of my closest friends. We were in each other's wedding parties. We still play basketball together in a city league. And every now and then, when the subject comes up, we talk about that day after practice. The day a straight teammate stayed behind and changed everything by simply being willing to have an honest conversation. Total _char_count, 12,927.